Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming this morning. The safety of our communities across Saskatchewan is something that we have talked about significantly over the last period of time, whether that's safety from allowing drugs to enter in to our province, to our communities, and the resulting challenges that come in the way of public safety, community safety, when they arrive and when individuals are supporting those lifestyles and those habits. There has been a somewhat related to this initiative raised over the course of the last number of weeks, largely by our largest trading partner in the United States and President-elect Trump, is with respect to border security, of which we've worked closely with our federal government on border security, enhancing our border security, because herein lies an opportunity for us, not just as Canadians, but to do our part to ensure that we have a secure border on behalf of everyone that lives in North America. Whether that be drugs, whether that be asylum seekers, whether it be illegal migrants, but to work together, hand in hand with the American administration, to work together for us as a province with the resources that we have, some of the very professional people that are keeping our community safe have joined us here today, but to do what we can to, one, take care of ourselves, two, to enhance the Canadian initiatives and some of the enhanced Canadian initiatives when it comes to border security, but at the end of the day, keep the communities where each of us live and where our families live safe. And so today we are here to announce taking some further and additional steps to enhance the integrity of the border, our Saskatchewan border, the 49th parallel along the United States, to address some transnational criminal activity, but also to ensure we are always deterring any opportunity for any increases in transnational criminal activity that may be occurring in or near our border. It's work that I think, in fairness, that these ladies and gentlemen that have joined us today do each and every day. As recently as yesterday, we saw the confiscation of a significant amount of drugs in the Swift Current area. There's people that have joined us here today that are involved in just that type of work, not only yesterday, but each and every day. We as a government have made significant contributions and significant investments, I would say, in our future in keeping our communities safe. Significant investments in specialized law enforcement teams, within the RCMP, within our municipal police forces to combat illegal weapons, to combat the influx of drugs, human trafficking, and better place to respond to various types of very serious and often organized crime-related criminal activity that's happening in a Saskatchewan community. In 2022, we established the Provincial Protective Services Branch, which really brought together law enforcement agencies, including our Saskatchewan Highway Patrol, brought together our conservation officers under a single command structure here in this province. What this allowed us to do was to maximize efficiency and ensure there's a coordinated response to the range of public safety concerns and various emergencies that we might come upon in Saskatchewan and wherever those emergencies might arise. The Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team was another team that we had formed. The crime reduction teams, the warrant enforcement teams, warrant enforcement and suppression teams, or the WEST teams. The Combined Traffic Services, Saskatchewan, warrant intelligence teams, all of these teams continue to deliver quite impressive results in addressing serious and organized crime in Saskatchewan and working closely with our counterparts in other provinces and other parts of Canada in keeping Canadians safe. Last year alone, we saw our provincially funded law enforcement team seize illegal items valued in excess of $17 million. This included illicit drugs, it included guns, it included cash, and it included other things like illegal tobacco, for example. The Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team was also responsible for intervening in several human trafficking cases. And that's closer than maybe we think at times. But thankfully, the Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team was involved in a number of these cases, but also working alongside and educating police forces and stakeholders and Saskatchewan people to prevent future cases from occurring in Saskatchewan. Our community safety, and I've spoken to this alongside Minister MacLeod on numerous occasions in his previous portfolio when he was Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Our community safety effort is really has two main focuses, and the first is in the recovery initiatives that we have committed to in this province. That includes the recovery capacity, building out to 500 recovery beds to provide that recovery service for those that have unfortunately entered into a life of addictions. You've seen the investments in access. Part of that is the urgent care centre that you see operating right here in Regina. The complex needs shelters, also an access point for those that unfortunately have entered a life of addictions. Well, the second focus when it comes to keeping our community safe is enforcement. I saw that yesterday with the seizure of drugs in the Swift Current area. That's why on all of those, a number of those specialized teams that I had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, there's an additional 180 RCMP officers that have been added to our communities and to our RCMP force here in the province. That's why you saw this last fall a commitment for an additional 180 RCMP officers to work in Saskatchewan communities to augment and enhance the officers that are working there today. That's why you saw a commitment and funding flow for over 100 municipal officers as well into the 7 communities that use municipal police forces. And that's why you see us here today making additional investments and announcements and looking to ensure that we have a safety and a safe and secure border on the 49th parallel. Our officers with the Saskatchewan Highway Patrol often play a role in identifying illegal activity during traffic stops that they make. Commercial vehicle inspections that they are part of, supported often even, as we talked earlier, by our conservation officers, our provincial conservation officers as well. But they also work closely with our municipal police services and in particular our CMP officers across the province to apprehend suspects and also help in the seizure of illicit substances that may be there. Since 2017, our Highway Patrol and Conservation officers have supported the RCMP in all Saskatchewan communities as a protection and response team officers by responding to calls for service whenever required. And we were talking earlier about the integration and how, in particular, the K-9 unit is working very closely with our municipal and RCMP K-9 units as well, greatly enhancing the work that our law enforcement officials are doing in Saskatchewan communities. As we had seen in the lead-up to what will be the first ministers' meeting, of which I'll be leaving for shortly after this press conference, we've seen the federal government and the outgoing Prime Minister had made a commitment when it comes to $1.3 billion in additional border security measures. We don't know what that commitment looks like and how that will actually augment or enhance border security measures, but we do look forward to working with the federal government on how those dollars can be invested to ensure that we do have a secure border on behalf of Canadians, on behalf of the residents of Saskatchewan, but I say more broadly as a continental North American citizen. The announcement that we're making today and the initiative that we're putting forward here today is that it will enhance that investment. It will enhance the border security initiatives that are already in place today. Our Highway Patrol and Conservation officers have many existing resources that include, as I said, K-9 handling teams, mobile command unit for conducting commercial vehicle inspections, and I believe that's the unit outside the doors here. We won't make you go outside until you leave. It's a little cool today. And all of these they have used in supporting law enforcement operations traditionally and will now in our border security measures. There will be allocated up to 16 officers, 16 potential patrol cars, all equipped with the license plate readers that you see, and I understand this one is inside in the camera. I've gotten all the technical briefings on this in the lead up to this, but the license plate readers as well as other specialized equipment such as snowmobiles, ATVs if they're needed. The K-9 unit's an important one to help in patrolling in these more remote areas along our border crossing as well. And Minister MacLeod, you might mention this, there will be the availability of some of the aircraft that the province has as well to patrol the 49th parallel. Working with the local communities as well, working together so that we can be the eyes and ears on the ground should anything occur along the Saskatchewan border. And we've seen that in the last number of years in other border crossings from the United States to Canada. Redirecting these provincial officers to focus on high-risk areas, or potential, I would say potential high-risk areas, will support the border security work and support the CBSA and the work that they do. And I would say it also will support the broader policing initiatives that we have in our communities, whether it's municipal police, keeping communities like Regina, Moose Jaw, Estevan, Weyburn safe, or whether it be our RCMP, that is much more broadly keeping communities safe across the province. It's these initiatives that will ensure that we have a secure border and will ensure that it doesn't elevate to a point where we're seeing, illegal drugs coming across the 49th parallel that ultimately will end up in a Saskatchewan community where that RCMP officer, municipal officer, is going to have to deal with all that comes with the presence of those substances. And so I would say very quickly, through to the individuals that have joined us here today, the conservation officers and our highway patrol officers, but also through them to their colleagues, I would say thank you for the work that you do. And I'd also say thank you in advance for the work that we are asking you to do. You're very much, with your teams and the equipment that you have, are part of what is keeping Saskatchewan communities safe. And I, for one, am very indebted for the effort and the work that you do each and every day, up to and including yesterday. We look forward to reviewing the federal government's full border security initiative, and I hope we'll have some information on that in the next day or so. We look forward to working with our provincial partners, and we've seen some of the work that is happening in Alberta as well as in Manitoba and Ontario. And we look forward to working together across Canada, ensuring that we have a secure 49th parallel, and we look forward to very positive relations as well with our American counterparts, our American friends, and our largest trading partner, which is the United States of America. So thank you. Tim, if you have.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much, Premier, and thank you to our public servants who have joined us here today. As the Premier announced, we are taking a proactive approach to strengthen security near the Saskatchewan U.S. border. The Saskatchewan Border Security Plan builds on the solid foundation that is already working in the province and is closely aligned to existing Provincial Protective Services operations. Redirecting 16 officers within the Saskatchewan Highway Patrol and Conservation Officer Service will enhance our law enforcement presence near the border through high-visibility patrols. Our officers will continue to intercept and prevent the movement of drugs and illicit commodities, engage in traffic and commercial vehicle enforcement, and conduct remote area patrols, further enhancing our border security efforts. It's important to remember that the public safety landscape is always changing. Risks emerge and continue to evolve, resulting in the need to adjust law enforcement and public safety priorities. Whether it's fentanyl trafficking, or street gangs, or social disorder concerns that lead to criminal activity, our law enforcement and public safety personnel are always ready to pivot where, when, and if needed to respond to emerging priorities. Having surge capacity available to address increased criminal activity is also a normal part of public safety and law enforcement operations. Fortunately, we are not alone in our efforts to protect the borders, our communities, and our residents. Saskatchewan benefits from long-standing partnerships with our municipal and First Nations police services and federal counterparts at the RCMP and the Canadian Border Services Agency. These partnerships have been instrumental in helping keep our communities safe. As part of the Saskatchewan Border Security Plan, we will continue to capitalize upon these partnerships. We will engage in operational planning with federal and U.S. law enforcement teams, and we will seek out arrangements with the RCMP, Regina Police Service, and Saskatoon Police Service to provide aircraft patrols and surveillance near the border as required. Each of our partners and public safety personnel bring unique capabilities and expertise that will contribute to the success of the plan. Together, we will execute this comprehensive approach for securing our borders. Before I go, I'd like to take a moment just to thank our Provincial Protective Service members, including our Saskatchewan Highway Patrol and Conservation officers, and all of our law enforcement and public safety personnel for their tireless efforts to protect our borders and reduce crime in our communities. We cannot thank you enough for your service and for helping keep our communities and borders safe in Saskatchewan. Your dedication and commitment is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Premier?
If there's any questions, Tim would like to take them.
I guess just to try and put a bit of finer point on it, to what extent is the threat of tariffs informing this announcement?
The threat of which, sorry?
Tariffs from the incoming American administration.
Well, I think you know, the conversation around President-elect Trump imposing tariffs on or after January the 20th, and you know, there's different ways that I suppose they could happen. It's very real. And you know, I've often said, President-elect Trump, what he says and the initiatives that he heads towards, you need to take those very seriously. And I think that the you know, the challenge that we may have facing tariffs, whatever the amount, is very, very real. You wouldn't always take everything the president says literally, but you need to take it seriously. And I think tariffs is something that we would like to and will and are continuing to work to avoid. However, if they are implemented, we very much that work will be part of our initiative to have them lifted sooner rather than later. They're not good for North American energy security, food security, or manufacturing security. It's not good for you know, the industries that create wealth in Saskatchewan and Canada. It's also not good for Americans with respect to the cost of fuel that they're going to buy, for example. And you can imagine if there's a 25% tariff on the fuel that comes from largely Saskatchewan and Alberta into the U.S. refineries, and it's going to cost more. And thus will your groceries. Thus will everything that American families and American individuals purchase. And so it is by no means is a positive step forward in ensuring that we have that continental energy, food, and manufacturing security, nor is it a positive step forward when it comes to the cost of goods that both Americans and Canadians are going to buy. That being said, there is an opportunity as we find our way through this for maybe a renewed and vigor and appreciation on the, you know, just how integrated our economy is in North America. And I've been in Washington on numerous occasions, whether it was when the steel tariffs were introduced or whether it was when there was a threat of, I think it was using Section 232, if I remember correctly, on some uranium imports. You know, telling the story of just how integrated our economy is and how many times, for example, a piece of steel passes back and forth across the border, how integrated our ag industry is, how integrated all of our economy is. It really is an integrated North American economy. And that is where we need to get this conversation back to with our largest trading partner, which is the United States of America. If the President-elect Trump has identified border security as one of the issues that he would like us to be working on collectively, you're seeing this announcement here today, you've seen other provincial announcements, and you've seen a federal initiative. And I think those all point towards a more secure border for not only Canadians, but for all North Americans. I would expect part of this conversation as well, as we find our way through January 20th and beyond, will be part of our military spend in this nation and others. And so it is going to be an ongoing conversation with our largest trading partner, and it's one that I think we're capable of navigating, and I'll be on my way to Ottawa for the first ministers meeting, but premiers have very much been engaged, all premiers, myself included, in reaching out and engaging at the subnational level, and we're going to continue to do so.
With respect to the impact tariffs will have specifically.
Pardon me? Yeah, certainly. We're going to, we've been talking about when to go to Washington. Considered the inauguration, it's expensive, and there isn't a lot of time for material working meetings at the actual inauguration, as there's a lot of ceremony. We'll certainly be with the Premier's mission in February at some point, and likely 1 to 2 additional missions beyond that. We have worked hard, I would think you would say, on our Saskatchewan to international relations, including the relationships that we have with lawmakers throughout the U.S., and have always worked hard at meeting with both Democrats and Republicans. We've been criticized at times, actually, for the focus and the investment that we have made, not only in the U.S. but in other areas of the world, on behalf of the strong, vibrant, growing economy that we have in Saskatchewan. And I would say today that we're very thankful for those relationships that we've built, and we're certainly pulling on them in conversations that we're having now. So, yeah, we'll be there with the premiers for sure, and likely at least one other, maybe two other times, or as many as necessary, I might add. And you know, even open to other ways to open up additional communication channels, not only with policymakers and lawmakers, but with folks throughout the U.S. We have a great, strong, integrated economy, and we want to keep it that way. Sorry, I interrupted.
Just with respect to the tariffs, I was hoping you might be able to elaborate a little bit on the impact it might have on specifically the oil and gas industry in Saskatchewan, and also if there's specific carve-outs that you're looking for potentially from.
Yeah, the carve-out would be everything, and that's what we'll be working towards, and that's what we're working towards now. The impact on the oil and gas sector, listen, virtually all of our oil and gas finds its way down to the Gulf Coast, where Americans go to work and the refineries add value to it and provide energy security for not just Americans, but North Americans, and then export it to other places in the world as well. And so it's actually a very good example of how integrated the economy is, how we are taking a product from Western Canada and adding value to it in the U.S. and creating that continental benefit for all Americans and Canadians. And I think we need to look at how we can do more of that. And I think, Premier Ford had mentioned, with the oncoming access challenges to, critical minerals, rare earth elements. These are spaces where there are a great number of synergies between Canada and the U.S. These are conversations that I think really lead to, us becoming, continuing to be a continental superpower when it comes to not only providing our own energy, food, manufacturing, security, technological advances, but ensuring that we are there into the future. By well placing the conversations around how we are going to utilize the critical minerals, the rare earth elements that Canada has, and we're in this space in Saskatchewan to enhance the continental global energy security, but more broadly security. And there's other nations around the world that will also be looking at, how secure is Canada? How secure is that 49th parallel? I would say that not all of them might have our best interests in mind. So we need to pay attention to it, and we always have, and we're going to continue to bring that conversation of the strong integrated opportunities that we have in that strong integrated economy across the 49th parallel.
With today's announcements, as well as announcements from other provinces and the federal government, what are you hoping comes out of the meeting tomorrow?
No tariffs would be a good, so when our largest trading partner, and that's not the reason behind it, but I would say when our largest trading partner identifies some challenges in his mind around border security at the 49th parallel, we pay attention. We export 65%, about $30 billion of Saskatchewan products go to the U.S., and so we pay attention. We import 80% of what we buy in this province comes from the U.S., and so we're much more reliant on the U.S. than we are with respect to the percentage of our imports versus the percentage of our exports. And we've dropped that percentage of exports by diversifying to many other nations around the world. Part of that is a result of some of the engagement and the trade offices and the investments that we have made in opening up some of those global markets for the products that we provide. And so if our largest trading partners identified the 49th parallel and border security as a challenge, then that's a conversation that we need to partake in. So that, I won't deny, is part of this. However, the flow of whether it be illegal migrants or whether it be illicit drugs or whether it be illegal firearms is north, not south. And we have a vested interest in stopping that, and working with our Canadian government in making the investments to better equip and to enhance the work that our Canadian border security officials are doing. But we also have, and I think this province very much is of the attitude that where we can, we're going to do what we can to take care of ourselves. And that's what this is about today, is to enhance and to augment the national investments in border security, but also to ensure that we are taking care of ourselves. And with a preliminary plan of 16 officers, 16 vehicles, a plane, and some additional equipment to ensure that we have a presence along that border. A plan that can ramp up to 95 officers if there's an issue. And so an issue would be a trailer load of drugs, for example. As it was yesterday, not coming across the 49th parallel, but in the Swift Current area. We all have an interest, whether you're a municipal police officer in Regina, Saskatoon, or an RCMP officer where I live north of Saskatoon, in taking those drugs out of the Canadian market. And so we can focus additional resources when they're needed, like they were yesterday. And much of that operation how that works operationally is already in space. And I credit the individuals that are here with us today because they have, worked with our other organizations as provincial law enforcement officials, worked with other organizations like the RCMP and our municipal officers in ensuring that we are taking that contraband and those illegal substances off the street. And, we should be very thankful for that. And so this is refocusing some of what is already happening on the border. But if there are additional investments needed, because there is activity along our border, you can rest assured that this is a government that, one, will work with the federal government to ensure those investments are available, or two, we'll make them ourselves.
I know things with the marshal services coming together more quickly than
Yeah, thankfully.
Are they going to play any role in this?
Absolutely. This is precisely where I view the marshals as being successful in this province, is to really enhance the work that all of our existing law enforcement agencies are doing, whether that work is on the 49th parallel, whether that work is downtown Saskatoon, Regina, or another community, or whether it be in the most rural areas in the north. Where our existing law enforcement officials might need a hand, of 15 officers or 30 officers or 45 officers, that's where the marshals, in the longer term, as we bring more of them on, will really be able to enhance the work that existing law enforcement agencies are doing without tapping into the RCMP, without tapping in to the municipal police forces. And I would add again that both the RCMP and municipal police forces are areas where we've made significant commitments and investments as recent as this fall. Tim, you want to speak to that?
Thanks for the question. It's minimal cost, actually, because we're using and utilizing existing resources and redeploying existing resources. Now, of course, as we evaluate the need and depending on the level of service that we have to deploy, with the immediate response with the deployment of 16 officers and existing resources, it's going to be a minimal cost. If we have to surge up to a maximum of 95 officers, then we would evaluate the cost, which would obviously escalate at that point, but it will depend largely on what has been deployed to determine the cost. Well, again, we're utilizing existing resources, but when you fly surveillance planes, there's going to be cost for the pilots and for the fuel and things like that. So when we're able to maximize on existing resources and just refocus our attention and reprioritize those resources, the costs remain minimal.
What happens to the work these officers would have been doing normally? I'm quite sure they're busy every day, and now they've got to spend 16 people at the border, so what happens to the conservation?
So the 16 officers that are being redeployed are officers that are in that geographic vicinity already doing work in there. We're simply reprioritizing, refocusing to high-risk areas, maybe a little closer to the border, but certainly the officers that have joined us here can speak to the areas that they cover are significant, and they're already doing some fantastic work. We're simply reprioritizing and refocusing the specific areas where they would spend their attention.
I guess I was trying to focus on border patrol before, but now they will be sort of a need for them to pay attention.
That's right. It's important to note that the border itself is a federal jurisdiction, and the CBSA and the RCMP will continue to be responsible for the border itself. What we're doing is we're exercising the resources that we have in the jurisdiction that we're responsible for to make sure that there's no gaps between the areas that we patrol and the areas of responsibility of the federal government.
I guess the concern is that this effort might spread local law enforcement a little thin on the ground in rural areas around the province, with police officers being redeployed. Maybe get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and we've specifically crafted the plan so that we're not depleting resources, but rather that we're complementing existing services and refocusing attention in certain priority areas, but not depleting or compromising any existing service. And we've had conversations with SUMA and with SARM and with other local leaders to make sure that we are not in any way detracting or decreasing service in any of our municipal police forces. And we've had very positive conversations and positive reaction from all of those partners.
What kind of conversations
Our officials are always in correspondence and contact with, obviously with the RCMP and our federal counterparts, and interprovincially as well, making sure that we're responding and reacting appropriately. As I said earlier in some of my comments, law enforcement is constantly evolving, and so those are ongoing conversations all of the time to make sure that we're responding where needed, when needed, as needed.
So have you had this conversation specifically about this initiative? Because I imagine it would allow or require more working together with security.
Well, again, we're not overtaking anything that the Border Security and the Canada Border Services Agency is responsible for. We're simply butting up against their jurisdiction where they're providing their service. That's their jurisdiction. But our services will complement that and make sure that we're not leaving any gaps and we're focusing on priority areas.
Just wondering which,
I just maybe have something to add to that. And I maybe call on some of the folks that have joined us here today on, you know, north of the 49th parallel, and the border crossing is CBSA officials, and there's some additional investment that is coming there. We're not sure what that investment is going to look like. What we're doing is just refocusing some of the efforts that our law enforcement agencies do today on some of that area just north of the border, whether it's 10 or 50 kilometers or whatever that is. To the question of moving resources around the province, I don't know that it's well understood just how closely our law enforcement officials work together as organizations and as individuals within those organizations today. And so that work is already very mobile around the province, where folks are from one organization will be assisting in this space and over here, up to and including yesterday. And we were talking about this earlier with some of the back and forth work that happens with the canine units, and I'd ask you to speak to that. But also yesterday with some of, without divulging any evidence, of course, but with sort of some of what happened yesterday. It wasn't just the RCMP or just a municipal officer that was involved yesterday, but it was multiple organizations that come together to ensure that at the end of the day, our communities are safe and we're removing, you know, contraband drugs and you know, firearms and those types of things from it. But do you want to go first? And then just about how you work with other agencies.
That's good. I've had the opportunity to work with the RCMP, other municipal police agencies, as well as conservation officers. It is a big part of our mandate that we are outreaching and working together, which I believe we all thoroughly enjoy. Now with the Border Patrol, we have extended with the Border Patrol, just letting them know that we are there to assist them in any way we possibly can, as well as with the RCMP and other municipal agencies. We work very closely with the conservation officers and the canine units, and I think together, working together, this will be kind of the strongest way to be proactive to the Border Patrol.
Yeah, like she said, we work with other agencies. Us as a canine unit work with municipal and provincial other canine units. That puts us into a good area together. We talk constantly through different communication apps and stuff, and we always know what's going on. That puts us in different areas, and we all work together in rural communities and get to go into different areas and patrol together.
How does it change your job and how you think as you go about your day? Maybe always look for people that might be crossing the border, but now might be a little more top of mind. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that's fair to say. They touched on the things that are being looked at and what they want us to do, and we're constantly patrolling and doing those things already. So that just puts us in those locations to look for those things.
Jeremy, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry for your business, but in a situation where you need to deploy 95 officers, what kind of situation does that look like?
Tim might speak a little more specifically to what that officer, and again, that's relevant to this conversation of agencies working together, RCMP, municipal officers, as well as our provincial teams that we have. But if we have a Roxham Road situation, which you saw in Quebec, where they had, a significant illegal migrants crossing at a border crossing. That would be something that would require additional investment, but in the short term, we would be relying on some of the additional investment that we've made in the space of the RCMP and municipal officers to help with our provincial and rural, because the border crossings largely are rural, challenges that we have. So I throw that out as one example. We saw, for those that think that can happen in Saskatchewan, very much we saw a family perish in Manitoba that was crossing the border in weather like what we're seeing here today. And so, depending on some of the policy initiatives that might happen south of the 49th parallel, we feel we need to be prepared, work with our federal government to and support and advise and help them with the investment that they're making, but also make our own investments and prepare on our own side of the border. Other issues that I think would call for a broader response beyond the 16 officer focus would be a significant or repeat drugs or human trafficking, hopefully never, but drug trafficking that might be coming across at or getting through or in between border crossings. And so, those are just some examples that we want to ensure that we are prepared. We have the structures in place, how all of our teams, our various law enforcement teams do already work together and call on one another. And this will just have a little larger focus on in that area down around the 49th parallel as we enter into some uncertain times, I think, in fairness. But Tim, you might want to speak a little bit precisely to what that officer complement might look like.
So I think it's...
And it would be temporary. I think would be, and if it had to be more than temporary, we would have to look at additional investments.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that all of the deployment of our resources is intelligence-based and based on evidence and need. And so our phased approach is really dependent on what feedback and what evaluation is happening based on the deployment of the resources that we've started with. So we'll start with the 16. We'll start with the 16 initially with, again, aerial surveillance, drones, ATVs, snowmobiles, things of that nature, and continue to monitor and evaluate what are we seeing for activity. And if the need dictates an additional resources, then we would call upon other additional resources. As the Premier spoke to earlier, with the Sask Marshals coming online, there will be a border integrity unit as part of the Saskatchewan Marshals. We could call upon that unit. The trafficking response teams, we could redeploy. Those units are already deployed based on intel that they're receiving across the nation, making sure that we're tracking people who would be trafficking border to border. So again, monitoring and evaluating, and then the deployment of those resources up to 95 of the existing resources.
When it comes to tariffs, the incoming U.S. president seems to have shifted from border security to what he calls he sees as a trade deficit between U.S. and Canada. Any thoughts on how that view?
There is no trade deficit. The additional trade deficits is being referenced essentially as not only, but largely energy products. But I think you could use this for many of the commodities that come in particular from Western Canada, but from across Canada going to the U.S. All too often those commodities are sent down in a semi-refined or a fairly raw form, and Americans go to work and add value to that product. That product then is providing energy security for other Americans and North Americans and other people around the world. It certainly is the case in energy, certainly is the case in uranium, which we send to the U.S. Potash is sent down and used in their agricultural practices, much like it is here, providing food security for not only the U.S. and North America, but many other countries around the world throughout the Corn Belt. And so those are a few examples of how integrated our economy is and how we create value on both sides of the border, and there's many, many, many. And so the tariff discussion, for whatever reason, is here, and we are going to do our level best to manage our way through that. But at the end of the day, if we're truly committed as Americans and as Canadians to not unnecessarily paying higher prices for the products that we have and hurting one another's economic interests, because they are tied through just how integrated we are. We'll get back to doing what we do best, and that is providing our continent with just that very fulsome energy and food security that we have always been a part of that supply chain. And I would say in my event, you provide general security to the communities in the continent as well. So it'll move on and it'll evolve. This will be an ongoing conversation. We hope to find our way through the tariff conversation sooner rather than later, in particular on the products that impact the economy in Saskatchewan, but as a Canadian more broadly, I think all of the products that impact each of us as Canadians. But we will have an ongoing conversation. You know, our 2% investment in the military is going to be part of that conversation moving forward. Would be my best guess. And I would just say that we're in a little bit of an unfortunate or vulnerable position here in Canada, just with some of what we see happening in Ottawa. And, you know, so my ask has repeatedly been to, for all MPs, regardless of the party they're with, is to make the call for an election sooner rather than later. We do need someone with a mandate, and I would suggest that, you know, quite likely if we're going to have success in removing any of the tariffs, it isn't going to be in the very vulnerable negotiating position that we have from a political perspective today, but it's going to be coming from someone that has a 4-year mandate similar to what President-elect Trump has.
Mr. Premier, this is the first time we've seen you publicly since Trudeau announced his intentions to resign. When managers want me to ask what you've been up to.
Blame it on the managers, eh? Probably the least well-kept secret, I suppose, just given all that's gone on in the last number of weeks and maybe even the last number of months with respect to his announcement of resigning, which is, I think, 8 days ago, which seems like about 4 weeks ago already. And I think it's largely been overshadowed by some of the relationship and some of what is coming out of our southern trading partner, neighbor, and ally, and in the incoming administration there. I haven't given a lot of thought to the announcement outside of how do we engage with this federal government on that U.S. relationship? How do we engage, from a provincial perspective on that U.S. relationship, and how do we engage with this federal government on ensuring that the commitments that they've made around border security are being invested in an appropriate and responsible way? How do we, what is this government going to do should we find ourselves in a tariff position, to support some of the industries that are being impacted by that? Those are all discussions that we'll have over the course of the next day, I suppose, as we're going to be meeting tomorrow. But I haven't given a lot of thought to that. I obviously have never been silent about the discrepancies that we have had as a Saskatchewan government, and I would say largely as a province of Saskatchewan as well, with a number of the policies that Prime Minister Trudeau and his Liberal government have brought forward. They're harmful to Canadians and harmful to how we create wealth, and I would say counterproductive and aren't achieving really what he has set out to achieve with those policies. That being said, he put his name forward and served, and that is it takes a certain degree of courage, I can tell you. Personally, I can tell you it takes a certain degree of courage to put your name and serve, and he has certainly done that. So I would, when he does resign, I'll thank him for his service, and we'll probably have an election shortly after that.
And what are your thoughts on Parliament being prorogued to late March and the leadership of the staff of roles amongst everything that's going on with our allies?
Well, the operations of the Parliament are what they are, and I understand there's some folks that are challenging them in court and things, but they are what they are. All of that leaves us in a very vulnerable position. We have no negotiating strength with President-elect Trump, who is coming in with the most significant mandate in recent history. Not only has President-elect Trump moving into the White House as president, the Republicans have power of the Senate as well as the House. We have no such mandate with an outgoing Prime Minister and a party that very well may finish third or fourth in the next election. So That is a challenge for us, and it's a challenge for all Canadians. And I would say that the Liberal Party of Canada, assisted by the NDP, have put our nation and Canadians in a very vulnerable position when it comes to the conversation that we're having with President-elect Trump today. You're seeing the Premier step into that space. The Premiers are only going to be able to take this discussion so far. At the end of the day, we are going to need a leader, a Prime Minister with a mandate, to sit down across the table with what will then be President Trump and ensure that that we can find a better path forward than tariffs to the relationship that we have with our U.S. friends and allies.
Yesterday, you said in an interview that you had you'd spoken with governors, incoming secretaries, congressmen, and senators, and I was kind of wondering who specifically you spoke to.
Many of them. You know, some of the folks that I've spoken to are existing and then incoming, and then some are just simply incoming. And so, you know, many of those meetings, and we could get into giving a number of names, but many of those meetings are not official, I suppose, yet, as many of the affirmations of, for example, the cabinet that President-elect Trump is appointing. Those have been identified, but none of them have been affirmed. And so many of those meetings, I think whoever's meeting have been advised to be unofficial meetings. And so I think what I'll do is leave largely those names off. But when you look at the incoming Trump administration and you look at the relationships that this province has worked hard at over the last number of years, many of those folks are coming from the Midwest states. Many of them are folks that we've had relationships in the past. And then obviously working with the governors, the existing governors of those very Midwest states now. The governors will bring a strong voice in this administration. You know, there's the federal Senate, the federal House, but the 50 governors across the U.S. will bring a very strong voice in you know, the conversations that we need to have to get back to you know, a strong, growing, integrated economy that's creating that energy security and that food security. So I'll maybe stay away from names at this point, but as we get into January 20th and beyond that, I can share more.
And I guess I've got one that's a little bit off topic, just with respect to the allocated firefighter resources to California. I was hoping to get
Right.
some kind of a comment.
Tim, Minister McLeod might have more to add. We're part of a number of compacts, and I can remember back to my time as a Minister of Environment. I think it was maybe 3 compacts, if I'm not mistaken, at that point in time. However, the work that we're doing right now with relation to California is working with our federal government. And in allocating resources, requests will come from California, and we'll allocate resources. Some of our resources fit the work that we're doing down there, and some maybe isn't as strong a fit. But my understanding is recently as today or yesterday, there's a team, some supplies, and 1 aircraft that will be made available. But Tim, you might have more to add.
Yeah, I think the Premier largely answered the question. We were contacted by CIFC, the national organization that puts out requests for things like this. And so through the Saskatchewan, the SPSA, we have reached out and offered 1 plane, 3,000 feet of hose, and 10 personnel, firefighting personnel. We don't know yet if those will be received, if that offer is accepted. So those resources aren't deployed, but they've certainly been offered. Well, at this point in time, we don't know if they'll need any. Certainly, if the need is there, we want to make sure that we're being a good neighbor and offering the services that they require that align with what we can provide. But at this point in time, we've made an offer, and we'll see, evaluate based on their need, whether that's accepted, and if they need more, we can certainly look at that.
Going back to the Marshal Service for the Premier, how large is the Marshal Service going to grow over time? Is there an upper limit of officers you're looking at?
Well, I think the target to date has been about 70 officers, and I just always, we'll see what the future brings, but I would say that there is no intent to grow it to replace any other law enforcement service that we have in the province. at least certainly not at this point in time. You know, we're well served by the RCMP in many rural areas in Saskatchewan. I think the largest community the RCMP would serve would be North Battleford. But then they are very much a part of all the major crimes, liaisoning with other provinces. And so the RCMP's service in this province, and each individual RCMP member, is invaluable. And the marshals are there to support them. Same goes for our municipal officers in the 7 communities that have municipal police forces. And I would say that they liaison well with the RCMP, and will certainly have a terms of reference to liaison with the marshals, where just like we're talking today in the question around, you know, what would an incident at the border, what would that look like that would require additional services? When you have the RCMP doing the work that they're doing, when you have the municipal police officers doing the work that they're doing, and you have the marshal service that would be able to come in and support that incident or any other incident in the province. That's what the focus and goal of the Saskatchewan Marshal Service is and will be, and it'll support the folks that we have here today, whether it be with our highway patrol or our conservation officers. And so the goal is 70 now. Be a provincial police force, but a provincial police force that is there to not replace, but to enhance and support the work of all of the other law enforcement agencies and individuals across this province, and we feel that is important. A testament to that is the fact that just this fall, we had added provincial funding, purely provincial funding, to add over 100 municipal officers into those 7 communities. Not municipal funding, not following the existing funding structure that is funding all of the other municipal officers, but it's provincial funding, adding those officers into Saskatoon and Regina and the other 5 communities. And the same, since 2011, 185 officers have been added into the, the West group and the crime reduction teams and all of the specialized teams that we have. And again, this fall, an additional 185 officers committed to the RCMP to ensure that we have adequate resources in the communities across the province. The Marshals is here to service and support all of those entities, but we're adding and investing in those very entities as well.
Let's do the last one, and then we can open up the
Lake irrigation and crop production shown in Saskatoon today. We're discussing the project. Farmers are quite interested. Can you just give us a little update on that?
Well, in the Diefenbaker project? Sure, yeah. Phase 1, we're looking at, and I can't remember the exact acres that is coming up, 90,000, and 90,000 acres that will be coming through Phase 1, which is part of the initiative of what Diefenbaker Lake and the entire project was envisioned to be in excess of 50 years ago when it was originally built. Part of it is for agricultural irrigation to enhance the value of the crops that we're growing here in the province. Not just to grow more wheat and more canola, but to enhance the value. Get into vegetables, get into those much higher value crops and increase the opportunities that Saskatchewan people have in the processing world and everything else. Second is municipal water security. Always Diefenbaker Lake was envisioned to build canals out to provide municipal water security to communities like Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, Regina. And I said third and somewhat associated with that is the industrial investments that are being made at Belle Plaine, for example. The industrial investments that are being made in the Saskatoon area, they require water security as well. A potash mine requires water security. And so for us to provide those water channels, those main water channels, yes, in part for irrigation, but 2, for municipal water security, so water security for you and me that live in a city, and 3rd, for industrial water security so that we can continue to, attract the investment into the canola crush industry, into the potash mining industry, into whatever food processing industry or otherwise the steel industry uses water as well. To provide security of water supply for what we do here in the province is very much the global effort and the global initiative around utilizing that Lake Diefenbaker water and our provincial allocation of it in the best interests of Saskatchewan people. So yes, agriculture, yes, irrigation, but it's much larger than that.
Okay, that's our formal portion. We'll just get the 2 officers, if you could just say and spell your name real quick for the cameras, and if it's just officer and last name.
Yeah. Special Constable Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. Yeah. First name is Knightley, N-I-G-H-T-L-I.
And my name is Corporal Mitch Hatzenbuehler, H-A-T-Z-E-N-B-U-H-L-E-R.